One thing I really loved about Sega back in their Genesis days was the fearless nature of their game design. They made a ton of games and tackled just about every genre you could think of. Seriously, have you ever sat down and compared Sega to any other company in terms of software output? Sega produced more games than any one developer by orders of magnitude during its hardware days. It really is unreal. They were not afraid to pull ideas from the unlikeliest of places, and in May of 1993, they released Dinosaurs for Hire for the Sega Genesis. It had originally been a comic book series starring aliens that had crash-landed on Earth. Stuck here, they hire themselves out mercenary style, and that's where you come in. There's a choice of 3 playable dinos. There's Archie the T-Rex, Lorenzo the Triceratops, and finally Reese the Stegosaurus. It was developed by Sega Interactive, a US-based studio that had previously done Greendog and Tailspin at that point. Often overlooked or completely forgotten, we're gonna take a look at Dinosaurs for Hire, see if it's any good, and find out if it's worth playing, or maybe even adding to your collection. The story here revolves around an evil dictator and his army of ninjas and biological monsters trying to take over the world. At least that's what it says on the back of the box. There actually isn't much in-game story at all. There's no cinematics beyond a 4th dino friend that gives you tips and strategies before a big boss encounter. Being that this is derived from a comic book series, you would have thought the developers would have gone big on an opening cinematic, but instead you were dropped into the action, guns blazing. Your choice of 3 selectable dinos really don't make much difference. As far as I can tell, their weapons upgrade the same, and the only real difference apart from their look is how they melee attack. On the surface, this would appear to be a straightforward run-and gun similar to Contra, but it's actually just as much a platformer. Stages consist mainly of gunning down enemies for your action, but in order to do that, you'll need to use ladders and platforms constantly. Your enemies are, for the most part, either little dudes that are easily dispatched, mounted guns, or some form of vehicle. None of these things pose much damage on easy and normal difficulties, but hard can be a bit tough, particularly the bosses. Some of these guys do some serious damage pretty fast, but most of them have a really simple pattern you can pick up on after a few deaths. Your weapon power-ups consist of 2 main options. The first allows you to add a spread shot to your gun. This comes in 2-shot and 3-shot varieties. You also get a power-up to increase the size and damage of your bullets. A fully upgraded spread shot can really wreck your adversaries before they even get on the screen. There's also a smart bomb that acts as a nuke attack and damages everything. Finally, there is a shield power that gives you temporary invincibility. Most of the stages end in a boss fight, as these types of games usually do. Dinosaurs for Hire is a decent looking game. Your sprite is large and detailed, and most of the stage graphics are easy on the eyes. It uses a very dark palette though, and while the backgrounds are fairly detailed, there are few instances of impressive parallax scrolling. On the plus side, the bosses are for the most part very impressive. Many of them are huge, some even a few screens tall, and really make an impact on the otherwise tame visual presentation. The developers at Sega Interactive had been acquired by Sega in 1992 and were originally known as Interactive Designs. They also did Eternal Champions for the Sega Genesis, and you can definitely see some of the same artistic markers between the 2 products. Like I said, I was really surprised to see an almost complete lack of story and cinematics. Even the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle games gave you a cool opening cinematic explaining what Shredder was up to, but here you get nothing. It was a real missed opportunity to bring the humor from the comics into the game and really add the extra punch to the graphics. As it stands, it's a decent looking, if somewhat uninspired game that just doesn't have the personality it needed to help it get traction with the crowd that would have appreciated it the most. I wanted something like the Turtles games with guns, loads of parallax, and some killer comic book panels to tie it all together. The visuals and overall presentation never quite live up to that, however. Sega Interactive breaks out the dreaded GEM sound driver to do the heavy lifting here, and surprise, it's not that bad. The biggest issue is that there just isn't a lot of variation to the music. You get a few tracks that carry most of the stages, an intro tune, a boss beat, and a death fade out. And that's it. This would have been one of the better GEMS related titles had it more content and variety. Here are a few samples for you to hear it for yourselves. While I have enjoyed this one periodically throughout the years, it definitely has a host of issues. Aside from some of the things I've already gone over, the stage design of this is just plain weak. There's no other way to say it. Guns shoot you off the screen, enemies fall on top of you, and there are some super cheap pit deaths that crop up here and there. The thing is, it's not a difficult game for the most part. You have a life bar that allows you to take quite a bit of damage, and healing items are all over the place. Your deaths are mostly completely out of the blue, and almost always involve some cheap-ass mechanic like bosses knocking you into pits or blind drops causing you to fall to your death unexpectedly. Damage comes frequent in some cases because your sprite is just so large and it's hard to avoid being hit, which can be irritating until you learn how to cope with it. Still, it's a run and gun in the same vein as Contra, so it still carries with it that base appeal that will satisfy many of you. It lacks most of Contra's creativity and the more impressive graphical elements, something that I think has really affected its legacy. Had Dinosaurs for Hire gone with a more comic book style approach with nice cinematics, added different weapons for each dinosaur, spruced up some of those plain and unimpressive backdrops, and added a few beat-em-up sections for variety, this may have been a winner that is still talked about even today. What we have though is yet another what could have been Sega release. A game close to greatness, but never quite crosses the finish line to make it happen. It can still be fun, particularly its two-player co-op, but when you finish it, you just can't help but feel it could have been, and should have been, so much better. I mean, it's Contra mixed with dinosaurs for God's sake. If Konami could make you care about talking turtles that could fight, surely Sega could have made a similar impact with this property. In the beginning of this episode, I said that I was amazed by Sega's game output in the 1980s and 90s, but I also feel that pumping out all that software was to its detriment at times. Sega had such an arduous release schedule that most games were shot out whether the developer was happy with the product or not. I think this is what happened to Dinosaurs for Hire here. The bones of this particular product are strong, and the potential was there for a hit, but it was ultimately shot out quickly and just not given the time it needed to come together. Again, it can still be fun, and like I said, I play it from time to time myself, but there is no question it lacks the polish of the better games on the platform. 4 more months of development and a handful of simple additions could have really made a difference to its legacy. I do still recommend you play it, especially so if you have someone to play it with. The bosses are cool, and on hard it'll beat your ass quite regularly. I would have loved to have seen Sega do a sequel where they took the presentation of Comix Zone and melded it with this IP. complete with run and gun and beat 'em up segments. It would have made an awesome Saturn title, I think. I'm Sega Lord X, thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.